Welcome back to the Stephan Hogan podcast. I'm your host, Stephan Hogan. It's great to have you here today. Please hit subscribe, like, share the content. Helps the podcast greatly. I've been repping a brand called Korchmar. They were created in 1917, and I like to think of them, and this is my own little thing, but they are where time and progress are not welcome, which means they're not using modern day technology. They're making things by hand in the United States with all American sourced leather, American labor. And I think it's important that we support American companies instead of outsourcing everything to where labor is cheap and quality is subpar. So if you like good quality leather goods such as backpacks or maybe like a travel bag, they have so many different products. They have cool leather stuff you can put on your desktop. Head over to their website. It's Korchmar, KORCHMAR.com, and then use the code SH10 at checkout. Again, Korchmar.com. You can follow them on Instagram. I think it's Korchmar Bags. And they're just a really cool company, really cool people. I've been getting to know them, and it's just something I believe in. So just wanted to throw that out there for you at the beginning. I'm not making any money. They're not paying me to say this. We're just developing a relationship, and we're going to talk about that today. And we're going to talk about patience and persistence. And my goal in my relationship with this particular brand, after talking with many, is to eventually develop the relationship to where, as this podcast grows, it can benefit them and it can benefit me. But that's all about patience. So I want to take you back to where I kind of started, where I grew up, and how I got into this whole podcasting thing and music. And for those of you that listen, that have listened to some of the music episodes, this will give you context. And I think it's important for me to share my story, because if I have a story like this, there's probably somebody else that does as well that has a similar story. When I was 5, I got my first guitar, and I started playing guitar. My dad did, and because of his influence and going camping and singing songs around the campfire, I really wanted to learn to play guitar. And I grew up in a small town, and my dad started to teach me how to play some basic chords on the guitar. And this isn't going to be a music podcast by any means, but it's more of a podcast of perseverance and of not holding on to results. So as I learned, my first performance was for my 4th grade class. I sang Let It Be by the Beatles. And then in 5th grade, I played in the talent show and I sang Country Roads by John Denver. And at that point, I was really hooked. I remember being so nervous in the audition for that 5th grade talent show. I looked down at the guitar strings and I saw them like vibrating in the light. It was weird, maybe because it was fluorescent, but the string looked like it was like waving. And I was singing Closing Time by Semisonic, and they wouldn't let me sing that for the talent show, so I had to change it up to Country Road. All that to say, it had me hooked at a very young age. And as I progressed through junior high and high school, I really began to find my identity in music. I played golf, I played baseball, but my grades were never good. And when I got to high school, to be honest, I was quite insecure. I was never really part of the popular kid group. I had friends. And it's weird, this whole idea of popularity in school. It's something that I think we probably all dealt with at a point. And I don't know what it's like now because I'm so far removed from being in junior high and high school. But at the time, you could probably relate that there are different groups of people, different peer groups. And I just so happened to fall into one of musicians that were like-minded. And I knew when I was quite young that I wanted to do music for a living, and I would spend hours and hours and hours just sitting playing guitar. I wasn't confident in singing. I just wanted to be a guitar player, but I also started to write songs, and they sucked. Quite frankly, they were not good. But by the time I was 18, I had put together enough music, enough songs to release a album. So I released my first album around that time of 10 songs. I recorded it at my friend's house for $100 a song for the entire song. My dad paid for it, and at the time it was kind of a stretch. And then I got CDs printed, and my goal was to go out and to play shows, to sell CDs, and that goal continued as I got into my 20s and I got older and I started to play more and I got a booking agent and then I got a manager and I was writing and then I was encouraged to start going to Nashville. So I was really fixated on I'm going to be a musical superstar. And as that journey continued, I remember starting to read books and journal. In fact, I have my journal in front of me right here as we chat, and I was journaling and having some coffee this morning, and I'm feeling good, and I was like, man, what could I contribute to someone out there that might be in life and asking questions and going through a difficult period of time? And I remember reading these books. So the first one that I really read that impacted me was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. You probably heard of it, and if you haven't, you should read it. It is one of the greatest books of all time, bestsellers of all time. Napoleon Hill was asked by Andrew Carnegie, who was the richest man in the world, Carnegie Steel, to figure out what were the success principles of the very wealthy, and he essentially boiled it down to what the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. And so there was this big idea of your mental willpower and programming your subconscious. And there's a lot of principles in the book. But after that, I read The Magic of Thinking Big, and then I read a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. And they all kind of said the same thing. How you think is going to create and to mold you into the person that you are meant to become. And you can kind of shift and shape your destiny based off of your thoughts. And a simple example would be if I woke up and I said, today's going to be a terrible day. Today's just going to absolutely suck. Well, the chances of today being a bad day are higher than if I said, today is going to be awesome. I'm going to have an awesome day. I'm going to go above and beyond to do something nice for a stranger. Might buy him coffee in the Starbucks drive-thru, whatever it is. And so these books started to change and mold how I thought about things. And I started to write in these journals I'm going to be this. This is going to happen by this age. And you see it in the book The Secret, which you've probably heard of as well if you're into podcasts and self-help books or self-development and that kind of category of things, which I'm very into. And I thought I could manifest my way into whatever I wanted. And everybody says, if you want something bad enough, you can achieve it. And I think there's truth to that, but I also think there's another thing at play, which is divine providence and human will. And so as humans, we have certain desires, and at the same time, there is a God who also has a plan. And you don't have to believe what I believe, but I'm just sharing from my experience what it looks like. So my wife and I, after many years of coming to Nashville and talking with publishers and being told, Stephan, you need to move to town. I don't tell people to move to Nashville because most people shouldn't, but you should be here. And I had just won a top 5 spot in this national guitar competition with Vince Gill. I was one of the top 5 finalists, and I got to meet him and his manager and his team and his PR person, Aaron. They were really cool. They brought me in and kind of welcomed me with open arms, and I got to come to Nashville after that Guitar Center thing, and I got to play with Vince and his band, legendary musicians. and they were like backing me up on my songs, and there was all this affirmation. And then I was introduced to the head of BMI, and I got to form a relationship with that person and share songs with that person, and it felt like everything was going right. Like I was going to get signed to a publishing deal, artist development deal, and that little kid was like, this is what I'm doing, this is how it's going to work, this is what it's going to look like. And once I got to the point where all that stuff was happening, it just felt right. It felt like, man, things are on track. Well, the next thing that you know, all of that just disappeared. And no matter what I did, no matter how many songs I wrote, no matter who I met with or collaborated with, it just seemed like all the doors were shut. All the doors were closing. And I met with many publishing companies over many years, many periods of time, many songs written, I like this song a lot. People wanted to sign me to single song contracts, and I just kind of said no. I'm gonna wait and hold them for my catalog for when I sign. And then I was at a point where it was like, all right, we want to sign you to a publishing deal. And so I had to get a manager because they wanted me to have a manager in order to get the publishing deal. So I got a manager, and then I didn't get the pub deal because things changed. And so I had this manager that I didn't need. And it never really felt right. Everything was rushed. And then what happened was a few interesting things. One, I moved my parents from California to Tennessee. And Haley and I, my wife, we lived in a little apartment complex in downtown Nashville. We were in a 1-bedroom. It was about 500 square feet. And both of my parents ended up living on our couch at separate times because they're divorced. And when my dad moved out here after we found my mom a place, he ended up living on our couch for, I think, 5 or 6 months. So it was me, Haley, in a 500 square foot apartment, and my dad. And that was really interesting because the majority of my time shifted from not chasing, but really pursuing diligently my career to being in a place where I was focused on family, moving family, helping take care of family, helping take care of my dad who has a lung condition, who was exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam, who will be turning 81 on September 10th of 2024, which is in a few days. So all this happened. We moved into this house with my dad to kind of help watch over him, and my mom was here, and my mom didn't know a lot of people, and she was in her 70s. And fast forwarding, I'm still kind of doing music, but I'm also kind of at this point where I'm being pulled into this pulled away, I guess you could say, from that into something that felt like a bigger purpose, which was taking care of my family, making money to pay bills, which is something every artist or musician has to figure out how they're going to do, including being offered a gig to play on Broadway and some other things. But really, I've always been entrepreneurial, so my wife and I started our own business doing content creation for other companies, businesses, and small businesses, brands, and that kind of thing. And so we were doing that as well. And what happened was my mom ended up getting really sick. And at the time we didn't know, but for about the majority of a year, my mom was really, really sick, kept getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. And we found out a month before she passed that she had brain cancer. She had what was called I might say this wrong, multifocal glioblastoma, and she had like 3 or 4 tumors in her brain, one on her at the top of her like spinal cord. And they essentially said, the neurologist, he was like the brain surgeon, because they went in and did a biopsy. They said, it's the most aggressive cancer, stage 4. Your mom's got X amount of time left. And we moved her into her house for hospice care after she had been in rehabilitation where she was doing some physical therapy and stuff. My mom never once acknowledged the fact that she was going to pass from cancer. She knew it, but she never gave it power. And it was really inspiring to see my mom being positive to the very last minute. During that transition, my wife and I found out that we were going to have our first child. And we had a son shortly after my mom passed. So this month, 2 years ago, not February, that's when my son was born, but September 23rd of 2022, my mom went to see the Lord. And it was in the evening. I was sitting in a chair in the room with her. At that point, she couldn't talk. She hadn't been able to talk for days. We had to stop giving her fluids because she was aspirating. And so basically, we were giving her this care kit they send you home with. And I remember sitting in the corner of a room and watching her. And I was on my laptop looking at watches. She had just bought me the most expensive watch she had ever bought. Like most money she ever spent on me as a gift. In fact, she ordered it for me in the ER the day she found out she had COVID that she got in the nursing home before she was sent home for hospice care. And there was a peace about it and a calm about it, and knowing like my mom's going to be with the Lord. She was a devout Christian woman that spent her life and dedicated her life to Jesus. Everything was about her faith. She prayed for me and prayed for my brother, prayed for my wife, prayed for my brother's wife all the time. And to be honest with you, she wasn't super stoked once she moved to Tennessee. She missed her friends, and she wanted to move back to California before all this sickness stuff began. But God had a different plan. And I find myself there September 23rd, 2 years ago, watching her breathing. And I said to my wife first, I said, hey, I think we need to get Matt and Melissa, my brother and his wife, to come in. Something's different, something's changed. I could just sense it. So they came in, and within probably didn't feel like more than 15 minutes, my mom took her last breath and went to be with the Lord. And at the time, it felt like this is how it was supposed to happen. You know, like it was me and my wife, her son, and my brother and his wife, her other son, together, Haley pregnant with a baby on the way. My mom knew that she was going to be a grandmother, and up until she could stop talking, she talked about the fact that she had a grandson on the way named Harlan, which stood for noble friend and noble warrior. That's what his name means. And my mom would tell everybody, all the nurses in the hospital, any hospital staff, about her grandson that was on the way. It was probably the most proud I've ever seen her of anything, was knowing that she was going to have grandchildren, because she always wanted them. And on her grave marker on her tombstone, it says loving mother and grandmother, because I knew she would have been the best grandmother ever. So following my mom's passing and being whatever it's called of her estate, the one that's kind of in charge, wrapping up things, dealing with all of that, my wife gave birth to our first son in February of that following year. So February 10th, 2023, her water broke on the 9th. We went in on the 10th. We didn't know her water broke. Or went in on the 9th, sorry. And she had a baby, a little Harlan, on the 23rd. So within this short period of time, my mom passes on the 23rd of September. My birthday is on September 30th, which is also the birthday of my grandfather, her dad. And then shortly thereafter, we have a son. So it's like this exchange of life and then bringing life into the world. It was beautiful, but also a lot to process. And so all of a sudden I was thrust into dad mode. And that whole year, and I had started therapy, I was just doing therapy. And it was like, I went full time into our business to support my wife so she could stay home with the baby. And I was running our business to support and pay our bills. So I'm working, my wife's at home, my mom just passed, I have a new baby, and then my dad's health, he had COVID as well, and he ended up being on oxygen 24/7. So taking care of my dad as much as I can, taking him to his appointments at the Veterans Administration. As you can see, my life took a dramatic turn from having meetings with music industry people to being there for my family. And it was a turbulent time throughout that when my wife and I realized, like, hey, we need to do some marriage therapy. We need to get back on the right track. I needed to reprioritize. And I remember making a video on my birthday right after my mom passed in Monterey, California. And we had flown back out to California where we were originally from. And I said, and I have the video of it on my phone, I said, hey, what's up, Stephan? This is what you learned this year. Relationships are the most important thing in this world. It's not about money. It's not about fame. It's not about any of those materialistic ideologies that we have where when we get them, the horizon just gets pushed out further. You get the thing, you think it's going to make you happy, and then next thing you know, you're looking at the next thing, and that horizon line just never stops being kind of like the stick and the carrot. The carrot's always just dangling. You never get to it. And so I learned that, and I made that video, and it was really long, and it was like, man, I'm going through some transformation. I remember praying on that trip, like, God, what is going on? Like, I need a win in my life. Life's so freaking hard right now, like, between the circumstances. And you don't plan for that stuff. You don't plan for your 73-year-old mother who eats all organic, exercises every day, turns her modem off at nighttime, the Wi-Fi, the router. She literally would not use a cleaning chemical that wasn't organic or non-toxic. Most healthy person I've ever met dies of brain cancer. Is there a reason why? I don't know. I don't have the answer. But I do know this. I do know that she's a lot happier being in heaven than she was on earth. And I know I'll see her again. And I know that it transformed how I view life. And it takes you from a boy and it turns you into a man when you go through something like that. So, fast forward to now. I'm about to be 36 on September 30th. Today's September 7th. My dad turns 81 in 3 days, like I said. And then in, I guess, 15, 16 days? I don't know, I'm not good at math. 16 days? No. 7 times 3 is 21. So in 2 weeks and 2 days, so 15 days, my mom it'll be the anniversary of her passing. And then I'll be 36. And I'm thinking at this point in my life, about some of the things that I would have gone back and told the younger me. Because that guy sitting at a coffee shop in his early 20s writing down how he's going to be opening for Florida Georgia Line, who's not even together anymore, to now is a completely different person. And like I said, it feels like the boy became a man. So I started this podcast because it was like, you've committed your life to music. You've met these people. Why don't you share what you have to offer to the world? But not only that, I went through mental health struggles from an early age and got on anxiety medicine, and I had OCD and AD, or OC, like real bad obsessive compulsive thoughts, and like my parents were gonna poison me, and I was gonna die, and a bunch of like really far out thoughts. When my parents got divorced, my mind just kind of went crazy, and I couldn't leave the house, and I was having panic attacks, and I was so depressed, and I had urges to cut myself. I didn't know this stuff was even real. So that was all part of my story too. It was like the health side, and that's all been part of my journey. Even now, it's something that I deal with. And I say that to say, I wanted to start this podcast because I wanted to be able to talk to other people that have had journeys. And I wanted to share my journey. And this music thing positioned me to have relationships with people that otherwise I would have never had relationships with. And it's like everything in my life became a culmination of experiences and relationships leading me to a place where I could help people like the younger me. And so if you're out there and you're kind of like feeling like you're chasing your dream, I say you chase it. But I also know this. The Bible says that basically a man in his heart, he plans things. He plans what he wants to do. But ultimately, the one that guides our path and directs our way in life is God. And for me, I have had to come to a place of surrender, a place where you let go. Vince Gill told me on the phone when I first moved to Nashville, he said, no matter what I did, no matter what I do now or in the past, when I was just on a hot streak through the 90s, he said, I would release something, but I had no control of the results. The results were out of my hands. And I realized that we're not in control. We don't have control. Control is an illusion. What we have is influence. We can influence. I can influence things. I can influence what coffee I order when I go to the coffee shop. If I want to get an iced latte or an iced Americano. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of decisions that are out of our hands. And when you can come to a place where you have drive, I'm extremely driven. I'm extremely competitive. And I have drive and I have purpose. And if I have direction for something and I have an idea, I'm going to go after it 110%. And you can have that drive. But what happens when you get derailed and stuff like what happened with me and my family and my mom and my dad's health and having a kid, like that was an unplanned pregnancy, by the way, but also the greatest gift that could have ever happened in my life, because now my life's more than just being about me. Me. It's about, oh wow, I have a son that I'm raising who's looking to me to be the example. And I have a wife and I have a family and we're building our own thing. And we're even talking about eventually having another child. And so things just change. And if I could go back and I could talk to that younger me, I would have said, Stephan, have these dreams, have these goals, but realize this. The thing that you need to focus on is your walk with God and how you can submit your heart to understanding that the outcome of what you do, that the result of what you do is not in your hands. And when you talk to someone like Vince Gill, who I just talk about a lot because of the mentorship I've received from him and the breakfasts we've gone to and just hearing his stories, and you learn from someone that has gone through it. You learn that you don't necessarily have to experience something to understand it and implement it in your life. In fact, I think it's better if you can read books and learn from people who made mistakes so you don't have to make the mistakes that they made. But all along in this process, I've been incredibly persistent. But my persistence has changed from persistence of meeting with publishers to get a publishing deal, to get a record deal, to go on the road, to be a support act that will be eventually the headlining act and be able to go sell out arenas and stadiums and do all these things, to now I'm finding my greatest gift to be that I'm a husband and a father, and I have my hierarchy of life as God, Jesus as my Lord and Savior, God number one, my wife, then my son, and then my family, like my dad. And I have to have me in there as well, and love for myself, so I can be there, because, and this is me preaching to me, if I'm not good, how am I going to be good for others? And that's something I deal with and struggle with, but that's a whole nother episode. But I really just want to give you this picture and idea of this whole thing. All of that has funneled into, back to what I was saying, a podcast where I can help people. And it just so happens to be that was the outcome. How would I ever have planned that? I wouldn't have. And now I'm sitting down and I've been able to meet some of the coolest people and interview them in a short period of time. And the podcast is, quite frankly, newer, going on 7 months of an episode every week. And 90% of podcasts end at 10 episodes, 99% end at 20. And this will be episode 27. And only 17% of that 1% do video. And I'm doing video. So I'm really in the top 0.17 of podcasts, which is kind of funny, but it's because I've been persistent. Now, most podcast people would say, I don't see a return on my investment of time. I don't see money coming in. I don't have ad sponsors that are paying me. And they look at Joe Rogan and they look at people that are making tons of money off of their podcast, and they're just saying, I am not there yet, and so I'm going to quit, because they're impatient. So I would say this: persistence and patience are incredibly important. And the Bible says it's better to be patient than to storm a city and conquer a city. And I think about the Nashville thing, and I think about what musicians in Nashville are trying to accomplish just in living here. They're trying to conquer the city. You see Morgan Wallen selling out Nissan Stadium 3 nights in a row. Putting on this massive concert is just incredible. And he conquered Nashville in my mind. You have your own place on Broadway, your own bar. That's conquering something. And I was like, man, you know what? Everybody says they want to be patient, but how do you get there? You have to go through things that are going to make you patient. So now my patience muscle is extremely strong. And I'm proud of that. And I don't look back at being in Nashville and saying, woe is me. This sucks. I look back at it and I say something that Jocko says in his book, Discipline Equals Freedom. Anytime something bad happens, he says good. Like, you had to sideline your music career, good, because it made you focus on what actually matters, which are the relationships that you have. At the end of your life, what are you going to really care about? It made you, your health was bad, good. Why? Because it made you healthier. Your marriage wasn't good, Good. Why? Because you went to therapy and now you have a stronger marriage than you ever had. So you could be a strong marriage for your son. So he doesn't grow up in a family where he doesn't have two parents that love each other, but they express love in front of him and he can see what a healthy marriage is. You've developed persistence and patience. Good. But the only way you got there was by having to do it. You want to be stronger. You want to build muscle. It hurts. You lift weights. It's uncomfortable. What does it do? It makes you stronger. Good. So if you're out there and you feel like you're getting beat up by life, good. You know why? Because it's going to make you into the person that God has intended you to become. And that is ultimately going to be the best version of you. We're all on a journey. None of us know the outcome. But I know that I have to be thankful for today. I have to be thankful for this one day. I like to write in this journal and start by saying gratitude. I'm thankful for this conversation that I'm having with you right now. I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful that it's a sunny day and that the weather cooled down and that we're headed into fall weather here in Nashville and that the leaves are starting to turn and that there's a breeze outside and that I had a really good coffee and that it's Saturday morning. And then when you get in this mindset of gratitude, even in the midst of your storm of life, you can say, I'm thankful, and you can get on a vibe and a frequency that's going to put you where Scripture says, give thanks in all circumstances. And it's like, I'm thankful. And I wonder why the Bible said that. Probably because it changes your entire outlook on life. Just like I said, you wake up and you say today's going to suck, it's going to suck. If you wake up and you start with gratitude, you're probably going to be grateful. I was talking to my wife last night. We were sitting on the back porch and it was like, hey babe, what are you thankful for today? She was like, I'm thankful for you. And I'm thankful that you're a good dad. And I was like, why? And my love language is words of affirmation. She was like, well, you're great with our son. You play with him. You're really patient. You can discipline him, but out of love. And I was feeling really loved. And then I was like, this is completely funny. I was like, I'm thankful that I have all my legs and my arms and that I can see and that I have my hearing. Because you don't know what you have until you missed it. If you have both your parents out there and they're healthy, go give them a freaking phone call. Give them a hug. Text them. Tell them you love them. Grab a coffee. Take some time out of your day to spend time with the ones that you love. Because at the end of the day, relationships are the most important thing. We can make all the plans that we want in the world, but we don't have control of the outcome. I hope you enjoyed this episode of me talking about me. But it was really so that you could get a little something that might encourage you. I think vulnerability is more important than ever. I think that we live in a time where people are divided. I stopped watching the news because all it does is create division. And I think that 90% of people in America, if they all stopped watching the news and you just hung out and talked to each other, would get along great. And I would encourage you to do the same. Spread love, not hate. I'll see you here next week. Peace.